Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Estate Planning for the LGBTQIA plus community webinar. We're going to start our program promptly in 2 minutes to give everyone a bit of a chance to come in. So welcome. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go, and we will address them either now or in the general question section at the end. Thank you very much. All right, thank you everyone for your patience. We're going to get started with our program this evening. My name is Liv Alanis Myers. I use the AA pronouns, and I am the Outreach and Communications Manager for the Office of Human Rights and Equity with Howard County Government. The office exists to increase equal opportunity, eradicate discrimination, and protect and promote human rights in Howard County. We are thrilled to staff the LGBTQIA plus Commission, of which I serve as the Executive Secretary. I will now introduce our two speakers for this evening, Brian Bailey and Byron McFarlane.
All right. Thank you, Liv, and the Office of Human Rights and Equity. Thank you for what your team does to support the LGBTQIA plus Commission. The month of June has certainly been a busy one. My name is Brian Bailey, and I use he, him pronouns, and I have the honor of serving as the chairperson of the Howard County LGBTQIA plus Commission. Pride Month, as we all know, is a time of celebration, a month of inclusion, diversity, and hope for millions, including those who call Howard County home. And on behalf of the Howard County LGBTQIA plus Commission, I want to extend a heartfelt gratitude for your participation in this evening's webinar. Let me give you a little bit of background on the Commission and how it came to be. The Howard County LGBT plus work group was established in November of 2019 by our county executive, Dr. Calvin Ball, through an executive order to promote diversity and civility throughout our communities. This work group partnered with county agencies, nonprofit organizations, and other community groups to create an environment of inclusion, communication, understanding, and respect throughout Howard County. The work group held quarterly public meetings and provided a yearly report to the executive, addressing and identifying current and emerging issues affecting the LGBTQ plus community. This initiative concluded in spring 2021, and following that, the county executive, along with the county council, voted to establish a permanent LGBTQIA plus commission to continue the essential work of equity, inclusion, communication, understanding, and respect for all gender and sexual identities. The commission consists of 17 voting members and began meeting at the beginning of last year in 2023. The commission meets bi-monthly with our next meeting scheduled for the second Thursday in July, which is July 11th at 6:30 p.m. Meetings are conducted in person and the public is always welcome to attend. Additionally, you can reach out to the Commission with any concerns, questions, or even ideas at lgbtqia@howardcountymd.gov. Our mission at the Commission is to drive policy and systemic change for everyone across the LGBTQIA+ spectrum. We've teamed up with multiple county agencies, nonprofit organizations, and community groups. We're working on creating that environment of inclusion, communication, understanding, and respect throughout the county, fine-tuning it, if you will, and we're committed to providing resources and support. We are participating actively in local pride events and fostering a secure, inclusive, and just community here in Howard County. We prioritize equity, leadership, and culturally sensitive resources. We're aiming to uplift queer youth, seniors, and communities of color, non-native English speakers, immigrants, the disabled, neurodivergent individuals as well, and address basic needs, insufficiencies, and the like. Our goal is to advocate for, support, and empower those while partnering with organizations to build a really inclusive and equitable environment that enhances everyone's quality of life. Pride Month, as I said earlier, was really busy, and it's not over yet. We participated in OEC Pride. We handed out lots of Pride swag. We assisted in raising the Progress Pride flag over the George Howard Building, the epicenter of county government administration. We teamed up with the AAPI Commission for the first in a series called Cultural Kaleidoscope on an interactive discussion and presentation on intersectionality. We hosted Drag Bingo for county seniors. Who knew that could be so fabulous? That was a great time. And we chaperoned and hosted a activity station for Howard County Public Schools' Pride Prom last weekend, proving that even chaperones can sort of be cool and that teenagers really love an activity that includes planting flowers. And then lastly, we sponsored Chase Brexton's Community Connections Pride Through the Years luncheon for LGBTQIA+ seniors, where we honored their contributions and facilitated reminiscing amongst friends. Today, we have the honor of hosting on this webinar Byron McFarland, Howard County's Register of Wills. For those that don't know, the Office of the Register of Wills is a public office established under the Maryland State Constitution, providing for an elected register in every county in Maryland and the city of Baltimore, elected every 4 years. This office offers guidance on estate planning, especially for LGBTQIA+ residents, and is responsible for appointing personal representatives to administer decedents' estates, ensuring proper and timely administration. The office assists the public with all the necessary and required forms, maintains permanent records for the county, serves as the clerk to the judges that oversee probate law in Howard County, and tracks estates, collects inheritance taxes and probate fees, audits accounts, mails lots of notices and court orders, and provides safekeeping for wills of those living persons who are residents here in Howard County. Our friend Byron McFarland was first elected in 2010 as Howard County's 18th Register of Wills and is the county's first openly gay elected official. He is the past president of the Maryland Register of Wills Association and has extensive experience in all levels of government, from the federal, state, and county level. He earned his Juris Doctor from the University of Baltimore School of Law and his bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland at College Park. He is a Howard County native, and his public school education fueled his passion for government and public service. He is a former elected member of the Howard County Democratic Central Committee and committed to lifelong learning. He graduated from Leadership Howard County's premier class, has served as an adjunct faculty member at Howard University's School of Law, and was named a 2018 Bonet Leaders Fellow, completing the Senior Executives in State and Local Government program at the Harvard Kennedy School. He is actively involved in numerous organizations across our county, including the Howard County and Maryland State Bar Associations, the National College of Probate Judges, the Howard County Estate Planning Council, the Maryland Student Legislature Board of Advisors, the Columbia Democratic Club, the Thurgood Marshall Democratic Club, PFLAG of Howard County, the League of Women Voters here in Howard County, the Howard County NAACP, NARAL Pro-Choice, the ACLU, and the Human Rights Campaign. In 2013, he was honored as a 40 under 40 by the Baltimore Business Journal. Today, on this webinar, Byron is going to discuss the importance of estate planning, especially for our LGBTQIA+ community, our residents, and the benefits of the county's new domestic partnership registry. He will also address fraud and consumer protection issues during the probate process, highlighting some scams targeting estate beneficiaries. As we know, the LGBTQIA+ community has historically had to fight for the same securities that other couples are guaranteed and have been afforded for generations. Without proper estate planning, that fight can continue even after death. So while progress has been made, same-sex couples must continue to be conscientious and thoughtful about their estate planning efforts. Estate planning can be certainly confusing and convoluted, especially with the additional legal complexities faced by folks who are in the LGBTQIA+ community. And that's why we're here today, to discuss these issues with Byron and listen to his presentation and help folks navigate the details in setting up an estate to honor your own legacy and look out for your loved ones while avoiding any frauds or scams that anybody who is unscrupulous may try to perpetrate on what can be a very difficult time after someone's passing. So thank you for joining us this evening on this webinar. Thank you to the Office of Human Rights and Equity again for hosting us. And now I will hand over the mic to the Honorable Byron McFarland, Howard County's 18th Register of Wills.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Brian. It's great to be here with you and Liv. And I want to thank you for your work on the commission. I'll just say, as a Howard County native, we've come a long way from having nothing for Pride to, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, having our first Howard County Pride, which was a one-day event. And it's evolved into this sort of plethora of community events where, whether it's the dog show, whether it's events in schools, or it's Pride itself, or our Pride Festival, which is in October. The breadth of programming is so wonderful to see. So whoever you are, whether you're an ally or you're a member of the community, there's something here that you don't have to drive to DC or Baltimore or New York or whatever, something for you. And I just really want to applaud all the work that's gone into that, because it's no small thing. I'm just really happy to be here to talk about, an important issue that, I've been honored to serve as Register for 13 and a half years now. I've seen a lot during that time. And one of the things that's been important to me during my time in office is, when I first ran, I was 26 years old and fresh out of law school. And, I asked around about the then incumbent register, have you seen her around? What's she been up to? What kind of, looked into the reputation she had. And she kind of was what you may expect from a courthouse official, someone who kind of sat behind her desk, did an okay job, but there wasn't a whole lot of, desire to innovate or be, to outreach to the community. And I thought I could do a better job, and that's why I ran. And I still to this day feel such a tremendous honor that Howard County elected me, not only the first openly gay candidate in Howard County, but also the first openly gay Register of Wills and the first countywide LGBTQIA+ elected official in Maryland. And we've come a long way. We actually do have a few other openly gay courthouse officials in Maryland. I'm still the only openly gay register, but the clerk of court in Baltimore City, Xavier Conaway, is openly gay. The clerk of court in Montgomery County is openly gay. So we're slowly making our way into the courthouses of the state, which are a place where it's sort of like the last place for us to make progress, really. But I've tried to use my time in office to make the probate process, the death of a loved one, faster, fairer, and less expensive for people, not just in Howard County, but all across the state. And I'm especially excited to talk about this audience tonight, or with this audience tonight, about domestic partnerships in Maryland and the progress we've made to recognize loving, committed relationships, both for opposite sex, same sex, mixed sex couples, so that they are treated more like married couples in Maryland. As we know, despite the fact that we had a huge victory back in 2012 in achieving marriage equality in Maryland, a lot of people choose not to marry for lots of different reasons, religious reasons, financial reasons, you name it. I have a lot of friends who are heterosexual, cisgender folks who have been married and divorced and they want a partner again. My mom is actually in this category. She's been divorced and she'd love to have a partner again, but she doesn't want to go through marriage again. So if we are about recognizing love and commitment, which is at the core of every marriage and every relationship, really, and any meaningful relationship in your life, we should be doing something for people who are partnered. As of today, almost 700 Maryland couples have registered as domestic partners all over the state of Maryland in every county except one. I'm keeping track of it. So everywhere, but I'm waiting for that first couple in the Lower Eastern Shore in Somerset County with all of 20,000 people there, someone to register. But in any event, that's been really exciting, and it's both same sex and opposite sex couples, and that's just exciting to see people take advantage of it. So with that, I think I'll just go ahead and jump into my presentation.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I have a PowerPoint here. It's relatively brief. It's just 15 slides. I'm going to try to get through this so that we can maximize time. Whenever I go and I talk to members of the public, and I think that I love, if I just sat behind a desk all day, every day, I'd go crazy. So I like being out in the community, talking to people. Me and my staff deal with all different kinds of questions about estates and what happens when people die, and what happens to their money, what happens to what if they don't have a will. We do that all the time. That's our job. And my goal is to get out into the community to proactively answer your questions, not wait until you have to come to us. And of course, by the time you come to us, usually someone's passed and it's too late to do anything about whatever they did before they passed. So I am here primarily to answer your questions, not just to talk, because I could talk to you all night about this stuff. But let's go ahead and get started. If I could get the next slide, please. And so let me just start with this. Like, why is estate planning especially important for members of the LGBTQIA plus community? Every family has, no family's perfect. We all have strained relationships with someone. Sometimes it's with really close relatives. If we're lucky, it's maybe only with distant relatives or none at all. We see conflict play out with all different kinds of families. Frankly, usually the conflict that we see most often is between when someone dies and they have children and there is a step parent. So it's stepkids versus stepmom or stepdad is usually the most tense. The other is usually when the second of two parents passes away and their children are sort of left behind, and it's sort of, you're usually grown, but you're also sort of orphaned. And that's when things that may go back all the way to when you were children, when you were minor children, will come out. And I've seen, we had a case a couple of years ago where it was two sisters in their 60s. These people were well educated. You would have thought that they would have kind of been able to get through this process okay, but one felt more entitled to mom's stuff because she took care of mom towards the end, and they wound up draining the entire estate on legal fees because they were fighting over photo albums, they were fighting over furniture, and so it can happen to anyone. But particularly for our community, we know we face an extra level of risk in that we may have close family members who do not accept how we identify. If you are a trans person, they may not identify you, by your chosen gender. Or the gender you identify with. They may not approve of your relationships. And so with all of the different levels of critique that we may face from people who are close to us, it's especially important to take time to do some estate planning to ensure that your assets go to who you want them to go to. You can disinherit, if you have a will, you can disinherit close relatives who might otherwise inherit from you if you don't have a will. And I'll use myself as an example very briefly. My parents divorced when I was a teenager. After I finished my court-ordered visitation with my father, who was very hostile to the gay community generally, I chose not to have a relationship with him, and I'm currently not married and don't have children. So under Maryland law, if something, and I'm also very close with my mother. So under Maryland law, if I didn't have a will, my mom and dad would inherit everything from me equally. And of course, I don't want that to happen. I wanted my mom to get everything if something happened to me. That's why it was important for me to have a will. So my dad has since passed away, so it's not an issue anymore. So I wrote a new will. I also my brother and sister each had children, so I wanted to provide for my nieces and nephew as well. But so, that's what you can do with some estate planning. It's also important, to choose who can make financial and medical decisions for you. So again, sort of like by default, you may have a partner, but as a matter of law, your parents, who may be hostile to your relationship and you have no children, let's just say, for example, your partner has no say as a matter of law in your medical decision making. It's up to your parents. And so you could be in a position where your hostile blood relatives, kind of keep your partner away from you, and, God forbid, decide to, you're in a critical state, a terminal state, and they take you off of life support when your partner, who you love and you really trusted to make that decision for you, is cut out of that entirely. So you can avoid that. And so by taking some of these steps, you can make sure that your assets go where you want them to, and you can make sure that decisions about your well-being while you're alive, and frankly also after you pass away, your funeral arrangements, for example, are made by people that you love and trust. So next slide, please. And when we talk about estate planning, I always like to kind of start off with what we call I had to update this from the last time I did it, because we now have 5 tools in our estate planning toolbox now that we have a domestic partnership registry in Maryland. But very briefly, the tools that we have at our disposal, and you've probably heard a lot of these terms before, you may have heard them thrown around interchangeably, but it's a last will and testament, some kind of trust, a power of attorney, an advance directive, also called a living will, and a domestic partnership registration. And I want to break down kind of what are each of these things and what do they do. So your last will and testament governs what happens to your probate assets, and I'll talk about what that means in a little bit. And it's only effective after you pass away. A trust is sort of think of it sort of as like a small business or something, if you will, where you can retitle assets, whether it's money, whether it's property, whether it's your car, whatever it is, and you can put that into a trust where the trustee of the trust, which is who would kind of operate and take care of all the assets in the trust, they're charged with dealing with all of that, and it's sort of all dealt with privately. And that can be effective for as long as you want. Some trusts are designed to last for generations. Some are designed to last only for a short period of time. A power of attorney, it's usually used for authorizing an agent, someone to make financial decisions for you. So oftentimes when people are sort of chronically ill or have some kind of diminished capacity, they will name someone as a power of attorney to, for example, pay their bills for them. So they have the legal authority to go and use their checkbook or their credit card to pay their electrical bill or pay a medical bill or whatever it is. An advance directive is also known as a living will. It guides medical decision making. So that's a document that you can use to name a healthcare agent who can make decisions for you if you're incapacitated. And so this is a document where you can kind of decide, if I have a terminal condition or I'm incapacitated and I can't actually verbalize or communicate what my desires are, you can sort of say, let's just say that you have terminal cancer, for example. You can say that you direct that you either everything from don't give me any kind of life-sustaining support all the way to essentially keep me alive as long as possible. And then the last thing is the domestic partner registry. And this is something that just went into law last October. I had the pleasure during 2022, over the course of that year, I chaired a work group of registers of wills and attorneys in Maryland who were working on updating what are called Maryland's intestacy laws. And that's a fancy legal word for the laws that determine who inherits if you die without a will. And these laws haven't been comprehensively reviewed in over 50 years. And we thought it was time to take a look at the whole spectrum of laws and see what we should do to reform them. And as part of that, we did want to include some limited protections for people who are living in partnerships, and was very happy to see that pass the legislature unanimously and go into law. Although I will note I had some colleagues and I think this is, by the way, I'm going to take a quick little tangent to mention how important it is to elect LGBTQIA plus people to public office at all levels of government. And you might not think that when you look at someone running for sheriff or clerk of court or register of wills, that having a queer person have a seat at the table matters. It does. And I'll tell you why, because if it hadn't been for me and my colleagues and colleagues who were supportive of this and attorneys, we had a bipartisan work group, by the way. There were conservative Republicans and there were liberal Democrats in this work group who came to a consensus about this. This never would have happened. So I was, the voters put me in a position where I could have a seat at the table. Actually, I was chairing that work group, and I was determined to get this done. And some of my more conservative colleagues were essentially hoping that the bill would not go through the legislature, that somehow it would die, because they opposed the domestic partnership piece specifically. And I got some fairly vicious pushback from a couple of my conservative colleagues. If you live in Queen Anne's County, by the way, or someone who does, tell them to vote out their register, because she's an absolute homophobe and kind of equal opportunity bigot. But I mean, it was, we had a meeting last year. It was pretty ugly, actually, where, these people, we gave them marriage equality. Now they want their cake and eat it too. That somehow by extending domestic partnership benefits, it's a slap in the face to the people who fought for marriage equality. No, it's not. Advancing equality and focusing on love instead of titles and names and institutions is what we should be about if we care about people. And so I'm really proud that we have this now. And essentially what it does is that for a $25 fee, you and your partner can become registered domestic partners. And if one of you dies without a will, your surviving partner is treated the same as if you were married. And it also exempts your partner entirely from Maryland's inheritance tax. And Maryland's inheritance tax is a 10% tax. that you pay if you inherit from someone who you are distantly related to. So a niece or a nephew, aunt or uncle, a cousin, or someone with no blood relationship, which would be a partner, you have to pay a 10% tax on everything you inherit from them. By registering as partners, you're treated the same as a spouse and you're completely exempt. So those are the benefits it confers. And I see a question, when in my lifetime should I start the process? I don't think that you're ever too young to start this. I think especially if you are single or if you're not married, the law does not protect you. Okay, we are very marriage friendly when it comes to this area of the law. So I think as soon as you are, I think as soon as you're an adult and and you have the right to, you have the legal authority to have an advance directive. I think that that's a really good thing to have right off the bat, because you can be 18, you can be 25, you can be 30 and end up in a really difficult medical condition where you may need someone to make decisions for you. And I would say for the rest of them, do you have to do those things as soon as you turn 18? No. If you're in a committed partnership, I think you should become registered. If you don't plan on getting married anytime soon, or if you don't plan on marrying at all, it's only a $25 fee. Having a trust is something that you should really talk to an attorney to. A lot of people think that they're kind of a cure-all to avoid probate and avoid fees and taxes, and that's not really true. And so I think that's something to talk to an attorney about. And as far as a will, I think as soon as you have assets, once you've been working for a little while, that's something that you may want to look into. So I don't think it's ever too early to start thinking about it. But especially if once you have some assets and you have a retirement account, you've got a car, you may own a home, you should start thinking about this stuff. Next slide, please. And as far as how do I get these things? How do I take care of these things? A will, we're going to talk about that in just a minute. A trust, as I said, you should talk to an attorney about that. There are lots of different reasons to have a trust. The main benefits really are privacy. If there's something that you want to have done with your assets that, for example, like a special needs trust, or there's something called a spendthrift trust where you may want to provide for someone so that they have a roof over their head and they are fed and they have medical care, but you don't necessarily trust them, or they may not have the capacity to deal with money on their own. Those are the kinds of things that you can do with a trust, but you should talk to an attorney. Power of attorney, advance directive, the beauty part with both of them is that there are forms online for those. You can find the statutory form, power of attorney, online for Maryland. And if you go to the Maryland Attorney General's website, you can find an advance directive and you can fill it out yourself. And the domestic partner registry, we take care of that at the Register of Wills in your jurisdiction, and it's just a one-time $25 fee. So if we go to the next slide. So I'm going to focus now on the last will and testament, because this is something that people have a lot of questions about and there's a lot of confusion. So when someone passes away, you have some combination typically of what are called probate and non-probate assets. And probate assets are assets that are titled in your name alone. Non-probate assets are assets that are jointly titled or you have a named beneficiary. And your will only deals with what are called probate estates or probate assets. So just as some examples, if you have a bank account that's in your name alone, or if you have a car that's titled just in your name, those are assets that would go through probate. That your will, when your will says, I hereby bequeath my estate to X, that those assets would be governed by your will. Non-probate assets are like if you have a bank account or a life insurance policy with a named beneficiary, those pass outside of probate. Same thing with you have a car, or if you have a home that is jointly titled with your spouse or a partner or anyone else, those pass outside of probate. So there is no kind of public scrutiny over that stuff. And And that is something you typically can do for either a low fee or no fee. So, for example, like you can just go to your like if you've got an account at Wells Fargo, let's just say you've got a checking and savings account at Wells Fargo, just go into your local branch, or sometimes you can just do it online, log into your account and name a beneficiary. And that's all you have to do, so that if you pass away, that beneficiary just has to go to the bank and say, well, my brother died, or my son died, or my mother died, and I'm a beneficiary on her account. And you sign some paperwork, and they'll distribute the funds to you. And that's a really great way to keep your assets, make sure they're going where they're supposed to go, and kind of keep them out of public scrutiny, because the probate process is a public process, because all of our legal processes generally in America, there's a kind of a presumption that it's public unless there's a compelling reason otherwise. So there are some free ways and some inexpensive ways, like with your car. If you own a vehicle or a boat in Maryland, you can actually go onto the MVA website and you can actually name a transfer on death designation for your car or your boat. So really simple. So if you look at my car title, for example, it says Byron McFarland TOD. So it doesn't have my mother's name on it, but my mom is my beneficiary. So when my mom passed, if something happened to me, my mom wouldn't have to go to the Register of Wills and open an estate and deal with my will. All she'd have to do is go to the MVA, and they'd transfer the title over to her just like that. Really easy. And I think the MVA doesn't charge a fee for that. I think if you're a surviving spouse, they don't charge a fee for it. So again, easy ways to make sure that who you want to get your assets, get them, and that you can do it in a way that's either free or pretty inexpensive. Next slide, please. And so the answer is, can't I just retitle my assets and not have a will? I get this question from people all the time. And I think that it's important to, go through each of your assets, your bank accounts, your life insurance policies, your whatever assets that you have, and try to make sure that you either have a beneficiary or a joint owner on them. And that way you won't have any estate at all. And so I always use the example that James Rouse, who's some of you may know the name, was the founder of Columbia. When James Rouse died, if anyone wanted to go poking around to see how much money he had when he died or anything, he died having put all of his assets into a trust. So if you look at his estate in Howard County, he did have a will, but his will said that basically if there were any assets that I didn't already put into my trust, I direct that they go to my trust. And it was actually the same when his wife passed away about 10 years ago. So, that's kind of your ideal, is that you have a will anyway, in case there's an asset that you come into and you don't retitle when you should have, or you take out a new life insurance policy, for example, or your life insurance company changes hands. I've seen this happen where, one company gets bought out by another. The new company sends you a new beneficiary form to fill out, and you never do. And you may assume that, well, the beneficiary just, it just carries over, right? Not always. So in that case, that's why you want a will, to make sure that if you forgot about something, or you inherit something after you before you pass away, but after you wrote, after you made all those designations, that again, it goes where it's supposed to. Next slide, please. And the requirements for a valid will, people always ask me, can you write your own will? Yes, you can. You can go on to LegalZoom or Rocket Law. There are a couple different services online that you can use. The requirements in Maryland are that it's in writing, signed by you, and attested and signed by at least 2 credible witnesses. That's it. So, you could take out I always joke, like you could take out a cocktail napkin and write, if I just wrote a will, it says, I leave everything to my mom. I sign it, and I have, the guy to my right and the guy to my left sign off on it. That's a valid will. I wouldn't recommend it, because you're definitely going to get some people, scratching their heads at, this is a little unusual, but we see stuff like that sometimes where, we do see handwritten wills. So those are the basic requirements, and a will be valid in Maryland. Next slide, please. And yeah, so a will can be typed, it can be handwritten, it can be a form. Witnesses can be anyone. They can even be people who inherit under the will. So if you're a beneficiary under the will, it does not disqualify you from being a witness, and they don't have to be notarized. And in terms of validity of wills, any will that was validly executed in another state will be valid here in Maryland. So they're interchangeable. Every state in America plus Puerto Rico has a NDC, has a law that says what I just said, which is that, you're Maryland, like if you have a will in Maryland that's written by a Maryland lawyer and you move and pass away in Florida, it'll be valid there. So that's something, people ask, do I need to, I moved here from New York, do I need to write a new will? Not necessarily. You may want to talk to an attorney because the law is different in every state, but your will still be valid. And even though it's something that we see sometimes in movies and TV shows, verbal or video wills are not valid in Maryland. See a chat question. If you inherit something after you pass, will that get passed on to whoever you designate through your will? That is correct. So it would come into your estate and then it would go to who you wanted it to pass to. That's a good question. Okay, next slide, please. And I'm trying to be mindful of time here, so we're going to be kind of wrapping up so we can get to any other questions. A couple other questions about wills. Copies of wills. Is a copy of a will valid? There is a legal presumption if we don't have an original will that the original was revoked. And so there is a process, though, in Maryland where you can you file a petition to probate the copy of a will. And if you get basically all the family members to consent to it, it can be probated. We see quite a bit of that, actually. Amending a will. You can amend your will without having to write a whole new will using something called a codicil. And so, for example, let's just say you bought an antique motorcycle. You bought some new asset, and you want it to go to someone specific. You can write a codicil just to say, my 2007 Harley Davidson goes to my brother. Or you want to change who you name as your PR. That's short for personal representative, which is also known as your executor. So whoever's handling your estate. So like minor changes like that can be done with a codicil. And you can revoke your will either by writing a new will, just physically destroying the will, or with some other kind of instrument. I always recommend to people that if you want to revoke your will, you should destroy it, and you just should destroy every copy of it. So I wrote a new will recently, and I haven't had it executed yet. But as soon as I started writing my new will, I took my old one and I put it in the shredder at my office. So once I have my new one executed, I'm going to post it on Facebook, because that's what I always suggest to people. Don't leave it lying around, because sometimes, there are changed circumstances from when you write a will to your next will. And we sometimes see a lot of family conflict when, you have a parent who dies, for example, and at the time they wrote a will 20 years ago, they had a loving relationship with all of their children. Between then and when they died, they wrote a new will because there was some kind of falling out. But that child, because they, were no longer part of the family, really, they've been holding on to this will for years and assuming they're going to get something, only to come to find out that, oh, there was a new will and I don't get what I thought I was going to get. And that leads to a lot of conflict and a lot of heartache. So I always suggest, again, destroy the original and destroy all the copies and execute a new one. Next slide, please. I'm going to run through this real quick. All of this is available on my website, by the way, but real quick, what can you do with a will? What are the benefits of a will? You get to name who takes care of your estate, first and foremost. You can waive the person who's taking care of your estate of getting a surety bond. This is something where without this waiver in your will, your personal representative or your executor has to go to an insurance company and basically take out an insurance policy for the entire value of an estate. And that can be quite costly. That can cost you like thousands of dollars. So you want to avoid that. You can specify how you want your property distributed. You can make charitable bequests. You can disinherit people just to make clear you don't want them to inherit anything. Sometimes that's not a negative thing. Sometimes it's actually because, let's just say you have two children or you've got two siblings and you've given generously to one but not the other during your life. You know, like you've got two kids and you gave to one their down payment on their house, but not the other because they're a brain surgeon or something, and they didn't need the money. And that's something where you may say, I've provided for my daughter Sarah during my lifetime, and so I leave my entire estate to my son John. You can create testamentary trusts. That's usually done when you have minor children. And there are a couple other things that you can do with it. So yeah, lots of benefits to having a will. Next slide, please. Now, once you have your will, what do you do with it? You have a couple of different options. You can keep it at home. Your lawyer can hold on to it. I always suggest to people to file it with the Register of Wills. It's a confidential service, so its contents are secure. It's only a $5 one-time fee. That's not going to get you a lot of different drinks at Starbucks. So go ahead and file it with us. And right now we've got about 22,000 of them on file in Howard County. And we have never in our 184-year history lost one. So I'm happy about that.
That could be your new slogan, Byron. File your will with the Register. It's cheaper than a Frappuccino. You know,
it is. Yeah. So, and we have no plans on raising that anytime soon. We want people to have their wills with us. And part of the benefit of that is that when you pass away, instead of your family having to search around to try to find your will, the very first thing that happens when someone walks in and says, my mom died, my husband died, the very first thing is, did they have a will? And oftentimes people will say, I don't know, or yeah, but I think it was out of date. We will check our records. That's the very first thing we do. And we check our records, not just internally, but statewide, so that if someone, you moved to Howard County and someone passed away here, we'll look to see whether you had a will filed anywhere in Maryland ever. So that's important. There's a question. What happens if the will on file with the register differs from another will? We will use the more recent will is the answer to that. So sometimes we will have a will on file and someone will come in with a newer will. And sometimes people will come in with an older will, but whichever is the most recent is the will that we will use. Okay, next slide. And I'm just about finished here. And so, one of the final last important issues here is what happens if I die without a will. So if you die without a will, you're deemed to have died intestate, and Maryland law will determine who serves as your personal representative and who's going to inherit. And they kind of follow bloodlines and degrees of separation, as you might imagine. So, if you die without a will, who's entitled to serve as your PR? It's a spouse and then your children. If you don't have a spouse or children, then it's your parents. If you don't have parents, then it's your siblings. If you don't have siblings, then it's your nieces and nephews. So, and it's the same with who inherits. And again, the point of having a will is that those intestacy laws may not reflect what you want to have happen. And so by having a will, you avoid sort of that default, kind of system from kicking in. But that's what happens if you die without a will. And every situation's kind of case specific, and we try to walk people through, okay, were you married? Did you have children, et cetera, to figure out, who gets what and who has to take care of the estate. And there's another question, does every state have a registry of wills? The answer is no. There are only 4 jurisdictions in the country that have a register of wills. If you're talking about the office, Pennsylvania, Delaware, DC, and Maryland have a register of wills. But when it comes to, if you're asking about a domestic partner registration, there are about 10 states that do. DC, Maryland, New York, Massachusetts, Colorado, Oregon, California are the ones that I can name off the top of my head. Next slide, please. And I think I already answered this, but you can get a will either by going to an attorney or using a service online. Next slide, please. So final recap is having a last will and testament is extremely important. Taking the time to do some of this planning is extremely important. Trust me when I tell you, I'm 41. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I hope to live a very long life. None of us wants to think about, all of us will leave this world someday, and we don't like to think about it. But I'll tell you that for me, having done all my planning, I have no estate. I have no probate estate. So all of my assets are titled in a way that if I passed away, there'd be nothing to do except, there'd be nothing with the state, with the judiciary to do. And just having a will and having all of those documents gives you, I'll tell you, it's a relief to me to have done all of it. There are some difficult decisions that you have to make. There are some conversations that you have to have with your family and loved ones. But it gives you a really great peace of mind, just knowing that, for my family, if something happened to me, I have this whole roadmap for them, right? And because I took the time to go through all of this, there'll be fewer question marks for them if something happens to me. So, as they're going through that emotional roller coaster, at least this won't be as tough as it could be, right? So I think that it's a huge benefit to yourself and your peace of mind, but also sort of a gift to your family and the people around you, really. And the last thing I'll say is that these issues can seem really complicated. I know I just went through an awful lot with all of you. If anyone wants a copy of this, or anyone, the presentation, or anyone has any questions, me and my office can't give legal advice, but we can kind of come close to it, sort of. We can help you up until, urging you to make certain decisions or not. And we can give you a complimentary list of attorneys if you want to reach out to someone to have a will drawn up, or if you think that you might want to trust, so that you don't have to just kind of Google your way to an attorney. We have a list that we can give you. And with that, I think that was the last slide. And just a couple of final quick things. Our website has a ton of information on it. That's my phone number, email address, and websites for the Bar Association, both Howard County and Maryland. But again, if you're looking for resources in terms of finding an attorney or answering questions, just give us a call or talk to us online. We have a live web chat feature. You can talk to one of my staff members. And I see there's another question. What's the alternative if your state doesn't have a registry of wills, and does your domestic partnership registration stay with you if you move to a state without a registry? So if your state does not have if you move to a state or live in a state that doesn't have a register of wills, there is some kind of probate system in every state. I would, as far as what you do with your will, I would probably make sure that you keep it in a safe place. I really don't like people putting them in safe deposit boxes because it gets messy with the banks, or ask your attorney to hold on to it. Those are a couple of options. So make sure that your family knows where it is. So like keep it in a safe place and make sure they know where it is, or try to get your attorney to hold on to it. And as far as your domestic partnership registration, unfortunately, the answer is no, because if you register as domestic partners in Maryland and you move to Kansas or Texas, they're not going to know what you're talking about. So that's, unfortunately, that's a state by state thing right now. I would hope that those other states that I listed would honor it. We in Maryland do honor domestic partnership registrations from those jurisdictions. So if you move from DC as registered partners to Maryland, we will honor that here. So we do have that reciprocity with them, but with states that don't confer these kinds of benefits, Kansas, Texas, Florida, Alabama, that's where if you're living in one of those places, you definitely need an attorney to set up all of your planning to protect yourself, because bottom line is those states just they're just not hospitable to people like us, and we have to protect ourselves. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So thank you so much, Byron. I really encourage folks that are watching this webinar or that may watch a recording to utilize the contact information that Byron has provided for his office. Obviously, they are technologically with it. You can go and use a chat function and chat live during working hours with one of his staff members. Plenty of resources on the Register's website for folks to look at. And I think there's a lot for the people watching the webinar tonight and that will watch a recording from the LGBTQIA plus community. It's a lot to chew over, and it really makes folks kind of think. These are not things that we want to think about necessarily, but things that we should be thinking about as we plan to not only protect ourselves, but protect our own legacies and provide for loved ones if that's something we want to do. So I know that we are about 1 minute to the hour. So I want to thank Byron for that really insightful presentation. His expertise and dedication to Howard County is truly invaluable. We have known each other and been friends for over 20 years. And I know that I appreciate the vital information that he shared this evening about estate planning and the specific considerations for our community here in Howard County and in the state of Maryland. And as we wrap up, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to everybody else who joined us for this webinar tonight and participated in this discussion, the folks that asked questions in the chat and others. Your engagement and support makes events like this, sponsored by the Commission with support from the Office of Human Rights and Equity, meaningful and impactful. But before we close, I'd also like to highlight something that Byron mentioned earlier, which is representation does matter at all levels of government, even with your courthouse team. So your courthouse team is everybody from your circuit court judges, your sheriffs, your clerks, your registers, and in some counties, your orphans court judges. So seeing openly gay elected officials is especially important. Representation is more than just visibility. It's about having leaders who understand and advocate the nuances and our community's unique challenges. So when LGBTQIA plus individuals see themselves in positions of power and leadership, it really sends a powerful message of acceptance and possibility to citizens, to voters, to kids. It fosters a real sense of belonging and validation, and that's crucial for the well-being of our community. And moreover, having openly gay elected officials ensures that voices are heard at the policymaking table. Byron talked about chairing a work group, participating in the development of things that eventually became legislation and regulation here in the state. Leaders like him bring firsthand experience and understanding to those issues that our community is facing, and they drive policies that promote equality, they protect our rights, and they really do address specific needs. His journey and achievements remind me of all the progress we have made, not only here in Howard County, but across this country. So the LGBT Commission, LGBTQIA plus Commission here in Howard County, once again, committed to fostering an inclusive, supportive and equitable community for all Howard Countyans. Your involvement is really welcomed. Stay connected with the Commission, attend our upcoming meetings, reach out with any questions, concerns, or ideas. Your voice is crucial to our collective effort to create a more inclusive and just Howard County. Visit our website, follow the Human Rights and Equities offices and the Commission on social media for updates on our own initiatives and events. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future webinars or events, please reach out and let us know. And then once again, thank you to our friend Byron McFarland for his enlightening talk and presentation. And thank you for everyone for your participation tonight. And then lastly, because if I don't remember to mention this, I'll be in big trouble. I want to highlight that our second and last webinar for the month of June is next Thursday, June 27th, sponsored again by the Commission with support from the Office of Human Rights and Equity at 6 o'clock. Same great time, same great place as this one. And the topic is gender neutral bathrooms here in Howard County and their impact on LGBTQIA plus citizens, enforcement, different regulations, all that kind of stuff that's happening here in Howard County related to gender neutral bathrooms. So we invite you to join us for that discussion next Thursday, June 27th at 6 o'clock here on the webinar series. Again, thanks to Byron, thanks to Liv and the Office of Human Rights and Equity. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you next week.